Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen of the YouTube Piped community. I hope this day finds you well and that this Tuesday has been gentle with you. It's not often that I make a midweek video. That might not be true actually, but it's not often I make one quite so quick after the last one. But in preparation for my evolution video, I hunted through lots of old photographs and bits and bobs, looking for things that I could show you without compromising other people. And I realised how many of the people that have made a big impact on my life and been really important to me are captured in those photographic memories. But I was also quite surprised to realise there's also quite a few people who impacted on my life quite a lot, but who for whatever reason don't appear in the photographs. And I was thinking about some of those people this morning on the way to work, and I thought that maybe tonight, as I'm home alone, been deserted by the family again, and my wife watches this, I didn't mean that. I thought I'd tell you about one man in particular. When I was 16, my parents decided that they wanted to move house. We started looking around, well, they started, I was just tagging along, looking around for suitable properties to buy. They knew pretty much what they wanted, and they'd been quite specific with the agents. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Telephone sales call, would you believe? Didn't you else get those? Anyone else get really annoying telephone sales calls just when you don't want them? Anyway, where was I? Ah, yes. So the parents were hunting for a house. They knew roughly what they wanted. They'd been very specific with the agents. And for whatever reason, we were booked in to go and see this particular property. And it was apparent as we walked up the path to the front door that it wasn't what my parents wanted. It was a quaint little single-storey bungalow, a very nice garden plot, but it was obviously quite small. Apart from my parents, there was me, my little brother, and some animals to accommodate. Anyway, they duly knocked on the door, and this old man answered, bid them welcome, and dragged us all inside. And it was quite quickly established, I think before we even got out the hallway, that this was a two-bedroom bungalow where my parents had specifically wanted at least 4 bedrooms. They apologised to Mr. Kennedy, as that was his name, for the intrusion, and explained that there's no way the house could possibly be suitable for them, and were very sorry for disturbing them. Well, I'm not sure how we got from there to the next bit, but we ended up separating. My little brother, who was 12 years younger than me, would have been 4 maybe. And my mother went off and sat with Mrs. Kennedy. And we were taken, my father and I, were taken off by Mr. Kennedy to the sun lounge at the back of the house. Now Mrs. Kennedy was crippled with arthritis and confined to a wheelchair. Mr. Kennedy had suffered from many long-term health problems, the most awkward of which was regular amnesia bouts. And this meant he couldn't go out on his own, because there was every possibility he would have one of his little bouts, wouldn't know who he was, where he belonged, how to get home. So this couple had become effectively housebound. And their intention was to move from their very pleasant little bungalow into a supported flat where they had wardens and help available to them if needed. None of this explains why we were there, of course, but Mr. Kennedy was one of those men who was able to weave a story, weave a tale. And there we are, sat in the sun lounge, and he promptly pulls out glasses and a bottle of brandy. And he patiently explained that this was not just any old brandy, although I could tell from the look in my father's eyes that it was a very well known and very expensive brandy. This was a brandy which had been opened some years previously, stuffed full of cherries, resealed and left to mature. Mr. Kennedy, it turned out, had a real passion for cherry brandy, and he made his own in that fashion. He bought the best brandy he could afford, he stuffed it full of cherries from his garden, and he left it for several years. Likewise, he pulled out a very substantial cigar, and with one finger to his nose, explained that he grew his own tobacco and rolled his own cigars, but that he probably shouldn't do, as he's an ex-customs official. Excuse me. Despite all his woes, despite the fact that he and his wife were effectively prisoners in their own home, despite the fact they were having to leave their home of many years, and the glorious gardens they'd built, the man was amazingly happy and upbeat. And one way or another, it came to pass that my father located a couple of military volunteers, and we hired a van, and when the day for their move arrived, we moved them. They by that time sold off a lot of their furniture and belongings, but everything else was moved to this compact second floor flat. Apartment, you Americans might call it, I don't quite know, but it was compact, but it was protected. And partway through the day, Mr. Kennedy and I were just talking quietly. I don't think I'd ever talked to someone quite that old when I was quite that young before. Even my grandparents had never really sat down and talked to me for any length of time. And he told me about the war. And he wasn't talking about the Second World War. He was talking about the Great War, as he called it, 1914 to 18. And he told me a story where, as a young officer in charge of his first group of men, he was given the order, along with everybody else, to charge the Jerry, now known as our German friends. And with a twinkle in his eye, he explained that the fashion of the day amongst the young officers was to not wear the belt and holster, but rather to shove your pistol into the waistband of your trousers. Anyway, the order came and off they went, out of the trenches, across no man's land, and as Mr. Kennedy so delicately put it, we jumped into Jerry's lap. Well, briefly he described the fighting that went on around him, his men, hand-to-hand combat with the enemy, and then he explained that he was stood in the middle of all this ruckus with his hand delving inside his trousers, trying to find the pistol which had slipped inside the waistband. With that same twinkle in his eye, he explained that he was quite worried about the possibility of it going off inside his trousers and doing himself significant damage. And he was equally worried about one of the enemy decided to pick on him whilst he was stood there with his hands inside his trousers, rather embarrassingly. Anyway, by the time he pulled his pistol out of his trousers, brandishing it happily in the air, it was all over and done with. That particular excursion had been successful, and for the moment at least they captured a few feet of enemy territory. But he never forgot that. And that and other things in his life made him feel that no matter what stage he and his wife were at there and then, they'd been lucky. And they had to be grateful for that luck. And bits of the messages that he gave to me that day have sunk in over the years. And one or two of the things that he gave me on that day and in the weeks before the move have become quite treasured possessions. They include, for instance, a small utilitarian and quite cheaply made bookcase, which I'm guessing was knocked out rather hurriedly between the wars. Certainly not a piece of master craftsmanship, but it's still here. It's still full of books, and realistically I can't see that I'd ever part with it. He also gave me a small telescope and some old dominoes that he'd had as a boy, gigantic cribbage set capable of holding several decks of cards as much as anything else. But more importantly, he gave me his experience. He shared with me his experience and his joyfulness just at being alive, despite the problems. And that's what I thought I'd share with you people tonight. Just a story of a young boy and an old man sharing time and space. I haven't got a single picture of Mr. Kennedy, but I can remember him as if he was sat alongside me. Can't remember his wife in truth, but I can remember him. Anyway, that's enough of that for this night. I hope it wasn't too much of a departure from my normal rants. I forgot the housekeeping, so we'll do that in reverse. I am smoking my 7LE320, gifted to me by a glorious lady. And in it I've got some GQ's Burper cake, which I haven't smoked for a long time, and which is wonderfully different. It's been helped down by some Old Speckled Hen, and now I feel like I ought to talk for another 20 minutes just because I've done the housekeeping, but I'm not going to. So with that, I will say thank you for watching. Stay happy. Speak to you soon.